we spoke last time about diving into the book, Man and His Symbols, and so we want to dedicate some time today to specifically focus on symbols. What does that actually mean for psychology in your psyche? And so we will just go right into it. So, symbols, what are they? It's a term, a name, or even a picture that may be familiar in daily life, yet that possesses specific connotations in addition to its conventional and obvious meaning. It implies something vague, unknown, or hidden from us, or further depth of a surface level image. And so, throughout our daily lives, we see a lot of these symbols and these ideas, especially if you're looking at religious texts that we're going to get into a little bit more. But it's hard to convey everything with just words. And so symbols are often the ways that you can hit people at an unconscious level and actually truly start to understand things to the fullest. But that takes a lot of reverse engineering of the symbols, if you will. But to kind of outline an example with this, in the book I was talking about an Indian guy, a guy from actual India, goes over to visit England, and he told his friends at home that the English worship animals because he had found eagles, lions, and oxen in old churches. He was not aware, nor many Christians, that these animals are symbols of the evangelist and are derived from the vision of Ezekiel. And that this, in turn, has an analogy to the Egyptian sun god Horus and his 4 sons. But essentially, this guy from India comes over to England and he sees this on all the churches. And so he comes back, he tells his Indian friends, he's like, oh, they're all over there, they're just worshiping these lions with wings, and these eagles, right? But there's a lot more to it. It's actually a symbol for basically the 4 people at the beginning of the Bible, with this Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And so the point is that these are all symbols and these are ideas. There's actually a lot more embedded into the symbol itself.
And I want you guys to notice too, symbolism isn't just a picture or an image. As we've talked about in the past, it can be hand signals. It can be a logo, it could be movements, it could be standing. You'll see a lot of secret handshakes, whether you study secret societies or anything like that, or even fraternity groups. A lot of them have all kinds of secret handshakes and secret codes, or secret, there's a ton of different sentences. Let's say me and JP are talking, and I just meet JP. Let's say I was a part of a group, and I'm trying to figure out if JP is a part. He's talking my same language, but I got to know, can I talk to him about what I really know? I might say a sentence, and if he acknowledges it or repeats it, then I know it's okay. We're good to go. So there's so much depth in symbolism. It's not only images. It's also postures. It's also how are we standing? Am I meeting? You'll see some of the Masonic people meeting in angles, in squares, like the compass in the square. So a lot of interesting stuff as we continue to learn and dive into symbolism. I'm telling you, symbolism is the most cool study in the world, especially with the Egyptians, because everything was hieroglyphics. So bang, that was a symbolism. Just like we do with our emojis now when we're texting. It's like, hey, that winky face, that could mean a lot of different things. It could mean, hey, I'm just playing, or hey, I'm into you. So those symbols, those pictures, those phrases can mean more. There's so much depth behind it. Confucius says a picture equals 1,000 words.
Yeah, absolutely, and I would definitely continue to keep that same idea in mind. A picture does equal 1,000 words, and that's often why our unconscious has to use symbolism to actually try and get these ideas to us. Because it's not enough just to, your unconscious is never going to come to you and say, you need to do this in life. It's going to show you through images and dreams and all these other ideas, which we'll dive into. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like symbolism is like a form of telepathy.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? People don't understand, we pick up on that, psychology, and just the way we communicate without communicating.
Almost like a download, too.
Yeah.
Imagine if
everybody gets different downloads.
Each person was a computer, and the symbol was the USB drive.
Yeah.
And now you can plug it in, and both people understand the depth of the symbol. But I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, it's like your words become more charged because it's not just a word you're speaking. There's actually a lot more depth to it. It's hitting you at an unconscious level, essentially. And that's what symbols overall do. And so several cathedrals have these type of imagery throughout them all. But once again, these are symbols, and they go a lot deeper than just being about basically the 4 people, which is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the 4 pillars of the church. There's more to it than that, but that's kind of the high level of it. But thus, a word or an image is symbolic when it implies something more than its obvious in its immediate meaning. It has wider unconscious aspect that is never precisely defined or fully explained. Nor can one hope to define or explain it. As the mind explores the symbol, it is led to the ideas that lie beyond the grasp of reason. And so we've talked a lot about we're in a world that's very focused on being logical, being very rational, scientific-based, and making sure that certain things fall into understanding the material world. But there's this, at the end of the day, especially with symbolism, it's always going to be about things that are more irrational, more the side that we can't really detect. And so you get to a point where it's beyond the grasp of reason, essentially. And so the wheel may lead our thoughts towards the concept of a divine son, but at this point, reason must admit its incompetence. Man is unable to define a divine being, when with all our intellectual limitations we call something divine. We have merely given it a name, which may be based on a creed, but never on factual evidence. So once again, it's like we're in the scientific world. People are very focused on thinking of everything that's here right now, this five sense experience. This is what's being real. And so when somebody looks at symbols, they feel something with it. It feels charged, but they don't know how to actually define it. And it can actually be reverse engineered into thinking rationally. And so what it gets labeled as is generally divine. It's basically outside of this rational, real world experience. And so with that, you have things like Jesus. Jesus, even if somebody's not Christian, seeing an image like this, it's like, okay, he's very illuminated, he's very colored, and thinking of ideas like this. The divine is outside of our rational thinking, but we understand that there's something that has a certain charge to this, right? And so symbols have a lot more depth. They flow into the deep unconscious layer of ourselves. And once again, it's like you already have all these things operating inside of you. But these are the type of things that start to bring it to light. The more you start to look at images like this and symbols, you'll start to get more in touch with your unconscious. You'll start to open up the gates that's going to allow things to flow from underneath. Those things are already flowing, but these images are the things that allow you to actually pay attention to it. So, there are innumerable things beyond the range of human understanding. So we use symbolic terms to explain concepts that we can't define or fully comprehend. So much to your point, what you're saying, it's like, when it comes to the language we use, what do you call it? So we use symbolic terms to explain concepts that we can't define or fully comprehend. So we were studying Jesus a couple weeks ago, and it's like he's talking about all these things where it's like, basically, if you're donating to a nonprofit, don't go tell everybody about it. But that also, he's getting at the point that psychologically, right, this has a lot more meaning than what he's actually saying. So he's getting at the point of like, don't do things for vanity. It's like, know the intention as to why you do the things you do. Why are you actually doing the things you do? What's the emotion? What's the driver that's actually running you and driving your actions, right? And so Jesus can say, one sentence, but he actually means something much deeper than what he's saying. So
to add on to that, it's like you guys hear a song. You've been listening to the same song for 10 years now, but you go through an experience in your life. Now you're driving on the car and you're in some type of mood. You're like, man, you really got hit with some adversity or some challenges and you're growing. And you've already heard the song 30,000 times. You've heard it. And then bang, it says something. You're like, holy shit, I never listened to it. I heard it, but I never listened to it. I never internalized it. I didn't understand the depth of what he meant until I grew into this experience right now.
Yeah, so your consciousness continues to grow, right? And so because of that, when you start to look at things that you used to look at, they start to have different meaning to them. Denby and I were talking about Victory Lap.
Yeah,
it's Nipsey. But it's like
greatest album.
One of the greatest albums for sure, dude. It's like you go back and listen to that after you learn stuff like this, you're like, holy shit, dude, every single thing he says, it's real as fuck. So, to the Teek's point, it's like the more your consciousness rises, you'll continue to review certain things, and I outline that even later. It's pretty awesome. So, how's it going? But, even images like this. This is actually Hercules. He's going against the Hydra. And so, basically, every single time he chops off the head, it grows two more in each place. I forget how he ends up defeating it. But, point being is, like, you look at this image, and it's like you feel like you've been here in your own mind. Like, you've gone down into your depths, like you started to kind of slay these type of things. And so it's a symbol, it's an image of something that goes on within you. It's something that happens at a deep unconscious level. And so Jung's point is the more that you can actually start to look at these symbols, the more you can start to become conscious of what's already happening unconsciously. And so what this is, and what we're really aiming to do, is make the things that are unconscious conscious. And that's one of the true beauties of looking at things like this, looking at myths, looking at Christianity and things like that. There's certain things that happen in it that we all experience, so it's like, let's actually bring those into the light, look at them, and see how they actually affect us within our psyche.
And when he says, look at the symbolism as well, don't just look at the picture, the image, look at the depth behind it. It's like the best movies in the world, everybody's like, man, yeah, that was the best movie, it just hit me. It's because it resonated with them, because it may not have shown the exact same symbol, but it showed the same defining meaning or the feeling that people get within this image, or within this symbolism. And then you also can get to where you are seeing past the symbolism and starting to relate to situations and being able to start to grow. What were you saying right before about everybody being in this situation, being able to feel? Fuck, I'm gonna have to come back on it because it's gonna come back. But
yeah, essentially, like to Teek's point, you can see all the depth down here. You can see all the decay and things that this thing has already taken. And so, like within yourself, you have certain things that have already decayed within your life. And so you have this beast inside you, right, that needs to be slayed because it's killing the society of your mind in a sense, right? And so it's like this thing has to be taken. You have to actually go out and battle it. And so that's why he's here. He's ready to take it on. And so you don't want to look at this as, this is just a story about Hercules. You want to be like, I am Hercules in this story. I need to go down and slay something. And you can, to Teek's point, it's like, look at the colors. Look at how dark it is down there. It's like this.
How bright Hercules is.
This is a part of your internal world, right? Yeah, and to Teek's point, it's like he's bright, and then it's like there's still the sun, so you still have the divine, God or the self operating as you're going down within there. But that doesn't mean you don't have to go through hardship and start to actually take this on. Whatever this idea is in yourself that's starting to take life from you, it's taking energy from you, and you need to go down and you need to slay it.
And I remember exactly what I was going to say now, thank you.
Yep.
So, heroes. So, like I said, all the movies, they resonate with the feeling or the emotion or all that stuff behind it. So you resonate, man, that movie made me feel good. That's my favorite movie. Now we look at heroes. Now, a hero is just a symbol. Why do you like that symbol? Why do you like that celebrity? Why do you like that athlete? Why do you like that singer? Why do you like that person that you look up to? You look up to them not because of who they are. They're just this fucking picture right here. You look up to them because you see something inside of you that they're doing that you know you should be or could be doing, and you haven't reached that potential yet, so you look up to them. Like, man, what if I could do it? What if I might be able to do that? And as soon as you realize that you're this guy, the symbol was this just the image, if it's humanly possible, then it's absolutely within your reach. Then it's like, oh, this is just a symbol of what I can be. So now you can take from every symbol that you want, take only the good. Take the gold from every single symbol. You put it all into one pot, melt all that together, and that's your potion, that's your gold, and that's your elite you. That's the seed telling you, hey, King Spermie knows what to become if you can look up to that hero. So just know, we don't look up to heroes because they're heroes. We look up to heroes because we see something in ourselves that is them psychologically, and it resonates with us, and that's why we love them. Like, man, or that's a beautiful picture.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful movie.
In a way, it's like I think a big thing is the journey, right? It's like you gotta let, like, it's the same way you let a movie take you on a journey, you gotta let a picture take you on a journey. You know what I mean? It's like the reason we're so attracted to the heroes, not because of the heroes like shiny, pretty jewelry, it's because of the journey the hero took. You know what I mean? So it's like we truly connect to the journey, not like you say the Hercules. You know what I mean? It's like we connect to his journey, not always directly just to him. So when we just see him, then we see that it's just you know what I mean? Just an image.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to Teek's point, it's like you want to take all of them, mix them up in this box. So you want to have heroes, of course. And but what you want to do is start to make them you. And so the more that you start to realize, I'm looking at heroes because I'm inspired, because there's something in them that I want to become. But you want to take those things, to his point, distill them so you actually know what traits, what characteristics you like from that person, and then see those things within inside yourself. But then the hero that you're chasing and the thing that you're idolizing then becomes your future ideal self. And then now it's what would that guy do? Or what would that woman do? And so now you can track all activities towards that specific thing that you're searching for. It's the same thing businesses do. It's like they know why they exist, And then every single thing they do is around that idea, right? And so great companies do that, where it's like the companies that fail don't know why they exist. And they just know, they know what they do. It's like, it'd be the difference between we're serving juice versus I'm here to heal people, you know? And those are two very different things. And so if they just said, I'm serving juice, then it's like it stops right there. But if it's I'm here to heal people, it's like, okay, there's future ideas where it's like, how can I heal more people? And so that continues to be the question. But it's the same ideas at the individual level. It's like, what would that person do? And so that's why getting a clear mental picture of the person you want to become is so important. And so it's like, if you don't have that, you don't have anything to start to track your course. It's like NASA going to the moon, but not making any corrections as one of their satellites is trying to get there. There's no course correction. And so if you do know what you're shooting for, you can always correct yourself as you go off course. But if you don't have this future ideal self, if you don't know what you're trying to become, if you don't have that future ideal self hero in your head, you're never going to be able to become it because you don't know what you're shooting for.
And now you can marry the two. Like you have these two heroes in your head. You have somebody that's a great warrior, but you have somebody that's humble, confident, and is serving and caring for this community. Now you can marry those two. So let's say you get in a big giant argument. It's like in the past you only had the warrior, so you went straight kill mode, and then all the repercussions happened. But now you found out a new hero, the king. You looked into the future. You took that gold of that king's properties, and you married the warrior and the king. Now it's like, hey, he might have to fight. He didn't antagonize the fight, but if it started, he finished the fight, and then he's back to where it needs to be. And then he's not talking shit about it after. He's humble. Let's get back to business. Right. So you get to marry who you want to be in any situation, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's the same thing. Like I know I was bringing this up, but what would Jesus do, right? But it's what would your future ideal self do? And so thinking in terms of that, or what would Nipsey do? You know, so it's like I'm dealing with this business situation. So it's like, what would Nipsey do?
And is future T gonna love that or no?
Right.
It's like, you gonna go eat out and feel shitty? It's like, oh, it's gonna taste great right now.
But
is 20-minute future T, is that gonna help him get to where he wants? No. So it's like, all right, that's an easy answer. You know, don't do it. Now it's a decision. So now you get to decide, you elevate or de-escalate.
Yeah, absolutely. So we bring all that up so you can understand the value in knowing symbols and ideas of symbols. So to kind of circle it back to all this and start to tie it in, this is the one reason why all religions employ symbolic language or images. But this conscious use of symbols is only one aspect of psychological fact of great importance. So man also produced symbols unconsciously and spontaneously in the form of dreams. So it's like your unconscious is trying to get certain ideas across to you to start to understand your internal world a lot more, because every single thing we experience here, and we're going to dive into this a little bit more, but the material, the way I actually interpreted the material is actually based off of my level of consciousness inside. And so every single thing, even though like I'm here right now, it's like it's actually, me being here right now is actually me and my psyche interpreting this outside world. I'll talk about it a little bit more, but no, our mind also produces these symbols. So it's like you also have your own personal symbols. There's of course symbols across all religions and all these things, but your mind's going to produce its own symbols in a sense. And so you get these images that get pushed up from the floorboards of your ego house, if you will, and they start to try to get you to understand that internal world and that internal mapping a lot more. Maybe things that you haven't dealt with. Going back to like this image, it's like maybe you had a dream of like a serpent, and it's starting to curl around your leg and like start to take things, and you wake up, it's like, okay, what was that about? But actually I had a dream like that the other day. But knowing that, and like knowing I'm actually looking for things in my dreams become a lot more vivid. I remember them more. But if I don't think dreams have any value, then it's just kind of like, cool, time to start my day. So if you can actually start to dive into these things. So just a few quick ideas. It's like if you're in the mountains in your head, like even if you think about Jesus, it's like, and he led the multitudes up into the mountains. That means he's going up higher. So he's going up in higher consciousness, right? So he's going to speak a lot of wisdom, and he's going up to this higher place. So you'll hear them talk about going into the mountains a lot when it comes to the Bible. But if you're like in the mountains in your dreams, you can kind of think of it that way. Or maybe you're held captive in your dreams, something like that. But the mind's in a prison. Basically, you're locked away from your higher self, and there's something that's trapping you within that prison, if you will. And then things like the ocean. The ocean's generally representative of the psyche or the unconscious as a whole, and kind of how depth and how abundant it is. Like you could never discover the whole ocean in real life. You're never going to be able to go to every single spot within the ocean. Even if that was your life task, you're not going to be able to do that. And to actually go to the bottom of it and like see what's down there and everything, it's absolutely impossible. But your mind's the same way. And so that's kind of what the sea is represented a lot of times. So even if like Jesus, for example, he's out walking on water, and Peter's like, what in the hell happened? And Peter's basically like, Jesus, what are you doing out there? They're all freaking out. And he's like, be of good cheer. And so he's like telling them to chill out, but Peter starts to walk out on the ocean, which would once again be representative of this deep, unconscious layer that we all have.
Deep unknown.
Yeah, the deep unknown. And so then he starts to step across it, but then Peter starts to fall in the water, and then Jesus holds his hand like to pull him out. But what do you call it? He pulls him out, and he's like, oh, ye of little faith. But he's getting at the point that it's like, having, like, it even goes back to what we were already saying about idols. It's like Jesus, there are certain images or heroes are the things that keep you above falling into the unconscious. And so you never want to fall into the unconscious, because that's when you get the inflated ego, and then you go into despair, depression, those type of things. And then
Anger,
basically,
hate.
all depression is like your psychological energy is falling into the ocean, and you're basically being depressed. That energy is being kept below.
You're becoming a lower version of yourself instead of the best version of yourself.
Yep, so having idols and having a future image is kind of what keeps you above the water. If you don't think the powers that you get from this ocean are your powers in your ego, essentially.
Yeah. Did you have something to say, JP?
Oh no, I was going to say this, you become like a drifter.
Yes.
And then it's easier for you to be controlled by negativity or Satan or whatever.
I am so thankful you said that, because I have a video that I'm going to do. I'm going to send it to you tonight. I'm recording it today. Let me know what you think, because I want you to add on to it, because it's beautiful. Thank you, JJ. My guy. Exactly. Drifting in the ocean, right? A leap in the wind, you know?
Yeah.
Some people think just drifting away is an easy way out.
Right.
Yeah. Well, they basically are unconscious of life. Yeah, it's like if I'm having a conversation with somebody, it's like they're literally not here. It's like they're not even conscious of life, and it's so sad.
And then, because they're not conscious, they're like a log. So some people have the motorboat, and that creates the wave, right? And they chose what they wanted to do. They chose to elevate in their consciousness. The other people are like the floating log. They never built their boat. They're just going wherever the wave takes them. But guess where the wave is going to take them? The wave is going to take them from the leftovers of the people who knew what they wanted and were driving the motorboat and creating the wave. Yeah, exactly. Damn straight it does. And they're like, man, well, why is my life shitty? Well, you should have got a goddamn motor instead of just floating and being like, yeah, just wherever it takes me.
You start building the boat a little.
Yes, and then it's like, hey, I want to go that direction. Let's make a point of sail. You only need one stick and a little thing for the wind, you know?
Paddle.
Exactly. And you just have to head in that direction. And now you start creating your own. And then with a little stick, guess what? You make a little wave.
Yeah.
And that wave keeps going. And then if
you start pushing all the logs away.
Yes.
Yeah.
So now
it's like
who
you started
wants it the most? Yeah. Who knows it the clearest? Who believes it the absolute most faith? That's who creates the biggest wave. And that's who gets what they want now. That's why only sometimes you're like, hey, I want to get this big wave right now. It's like, you want it, you're excited about it, but you only have 75% faith. Boom, you don't get it. You're like, well, what the hell? How come the law didn't work? How come it didn't? They said if I knew what I wanted, I'd get it. Well, there's more components to the equation. And once you understand all the components to the equation, you can make that wave and you can get it now. Jesus created miracles, boom, right there. It's like instant manifestation. Miracles, miraculous. So it's like, know what you want, and that creates your waves. Even the heart gives wave. Every beat, it's literally, why do you think they do 6 feet social distancing? Because the fucking heart has electromagnetic field 6 feet away. Look it up. Google that shit. Google that. Actually, DuckDuckGo is Google's back.
Exactly. DuckDuckGo. It's not easy to grasp this point, once again, all these symbol talks that we're having, but the point must be grasped if we are to know more about the ways in which the human mind works. Man, as we realize, if we reflect for a moment, never perceives anything fully or comprehends anything completely. So this is going back to the point I was talking about. Like, you see this whole world around you, you smell, you taste, you touch, you do all those things. But you're limited to those things. And so it's like even different animals in the world can hear a lot more than us. they can taste a lot more than us. And so he can see a lot more colors than us, right? A ridiculous amount more than us. And so he can see, he can hear, he can touch and taste, but how far he sees, how well he hears, what his touch tells him, and what he tastes depend upon the number and the quality of his senses. And so, to T's point, it's like going back and re-listening to an album or going back and re-watching a movie. The vibe of it changes because your consciousness changes, and so you get better at looking and interpreting this outside world. But even then, it's like there's still another level to hit, so you'll never actually be able to interpret this world as it actually is. Every single memory you have is not actually the real event. And so to memorize that, even like memories of dreams, they affect you. And so realizing that every single experience you have, it wasn't the actual experience. And so these limit his perception of the world around him.
The most best mark of intelligence is like what Socrates says. All that I know is that I don't know. It's like the more I know, the more I don't know, because we'll never comprehend it. We can get an outline, like we can get a skeleton to get us in a direction. But it's like, shit, man. Our brains can't comprehend it. There's so much.
So, this goes back to the scientific era we're in. But by using scientific instruments, he can partly compensate for his deficiencies of his senses. For example, he can extend the range of his vision by binoculars or of his hearing by electrical amplification. The most elaborate apparatus cannot do more than bring distance or small objects within the range of his eyes, or make faint sounds more audible. No matter what instruments he uses, at some point he reaches the edge of certainty beyond which conscious knowledge cannot pass. So it's like regardless of what you're doing, you're measuring the outside world, but at the end of the day, that still doesn't mean you're actually fully experiencing the outside world. So you can do all these things with science, but you're never going to be able to truly understand the outside world.
And because TK grew up with different experiences and I grew up with different experiences, if you put us in the same room, we watched the same movie, or we read the same book, or we watched the same science experiment, we're going to interpret it two completely different ways. We can have a lot of similarities, but my five senses experience so many different things through 25 years than TK's five senses through 25 years. So we're going to interpret it just a little bit differently, and that's okay.
Yeah, so our perception of reality is always going to be different. And with that said, we must not forget that symbolism has run rampant in every religion, that's meant to be religion, group, or ancient civilization. And many of the most advanced thinkers, was this you?
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. And this was to add on to not just the psychological side, but the physical side of what we were talking about earlier, that many of the greatest thinkers, the heads of religion, you look at the head of Catholicism, when they were starting to do like even the Spanish conquistadors, that's my lineage, where they were coming over and then they were just burning and pillaging all the Mayans' books and stuff like that. It's very interesting to know the biggest thinkers. If you can control the story, you can control everything. But there's so many symbols from Egypt, from the Mayans in Central America, from pyramids in India and different places, different magnetic places around the world. But these symbols are everywhere. If you look at the phallus, so you look at the Washington Monument, it's basically, it goes all the way back to Egyptian times, to Horus. The phallus is just a big stick. It represents creation, life, fertility. It's a male genitalia in essence. And there's so many different things that run rampant. So don't just be like, oh, you know what, I saw this in my dream, but I saw it out here, it has to mean this. You don't have to attach the same. They may mean a different thing, because a cross may mean a certain thing throughout history, but it attached to a meaning in your head of how a cross made you feel maybe in the past. So you have to understand that these symbols are everywhere, and there is deep, deep meaning behind them. So don't just see the symbol and say, yeah, that could mean 1,000 different things, it is what it is. Start using it and asking, well, what could that mean? And then once we ask what could it mean, let's put ourselves in the author of the symbol's shoes. Let's say we're watching a movie. What does this guy think about that? Oh, he put a cross in his movie. Is he a Christian or is he a different religion? If he's a different religion, that cross might mean something different. Does that make sense? So we have to put ourselves in that shoes of the author of the symbol, or the Egyptians put hieroglyphs there. If I go back and put myself in an Egyptian mindset, what would that look like? And so now we can see if it still feels congruent with our first interpretation. Does that line up? If not, maybe we're missing things. So just something to be aware of. Because Manly P. Hall right here, he He's a very interesting person if you guys ever want to look into him. A ton of amazing information. But he knew a lot about symbolism. Zeal will fall from the eyes of men. What is this telling you right here? That so many people are sleeping, so many people are hypnotized. They're watching a movie and there's something going on. They're watching the play, but they're not seeing the, hey, costume change back there, go here. You know, you're up in 2 minutes here. They're not seeing all the back work that's going on behind the picture. So if you can start understanding that the picture's in front, you got to get behind the picture. I'm telling you, you're going to be walking around literally just like the Matrix, like Neo in the Matrix. What the fuck is that lady doing? She's like, yeah, she sat in a clothing store for 10 hours today just shopping. It's like, you just wasted 10 hours of your life because somebody told you through growing up that, hey, if you don't have the sexiest outfit, you're not going to be attracted to a man. So you better find the right one, and it's going to take you a long time to find that right one. So now they're wasting 10, 20, 30, 40, 60 hours a week shopping because they're trying to fulfill that need. So symbols, guys, I'm telling you, and celebrities do it, secret societies do it, the biggest political figures in history do it. There's so much, everything's connected. It gets pretty crazy, and I get hyped up. But just know you're watching a movie. When we got brought into this world, they were already so advanced about storytelling. They knew if you can teach a young child from the very beginning, here's a certain story, here's a certain way of thinking, here's certain symbols that you need to understand. That's all they think. Until something happens to them in life, so shook up, they're like, man, that was a veil. That was a curtain. That's not how the life really is. And they're like, oh, it might be a new world. So look at these symbols.
And another important thing to note is, regardless of whether or not you're going to want to look at them, they're there. And so it's just they're operating at an unconscious level all the time. And so whether it's a psychological symbol or an occult symbol or secret society, whatever it may be, it's like all this symbolism is always operating. And so once again, it's like making what's unconscious conscious. You're trying to be aware of the world around you, and once again, raise that level of consciousness is what we're looking to do, which is the individuation. But perception of reality. In fact, that even when our senses react to real phenomena, sights and sounds, they are somehow translated from the realm of reality into the mind. So once again, we're going about our world and we're having all these experiences outside of us, but they get translated into our psyche. And so essentially, once again, you never actually have to experience the real world ever. So, but within the mind, they become psychic events whose ultimate nature is unknowable, for the psyche cannot know its own physical substance. Thus, every experience contains an indefinite number of unknown factors, not to speak of the fact that every concrete object is always unknown in certain respects, because we cannot know the ultimate nature of matter itself. And so, regardless, science is basically the study of all this material, but even with all the science that we have, we can still never truly interpret the outside world. And so it's very easy I mean, nowadays they just say an expert said this, and then it's like, okay.
New study shows.
That meme's cracking me up. But they just put new study shows that you can put anything before, or you can say a new study before anything and people will believe it. So it's just, nobody looks at the study, nobody looks at what's actually in it. And just like, even studies are just the result of a certain set of people, and then they get the average, right? So there's always the people that are not average in every single one of those circumstances. But point being is science only goes so far. But to what Teague's already saying, movies, albums, books, all media, every single thing, when you go back, you find new things through our new lens of conscious. We can perceive more and holds more meaning due to us being more conscious. And so you raise your level of consciousness, your ability to think, and actually perceive this outside world as well as your inside world. You can go back and watch a movie and be like, holy shit, didn't catch that before. Reread that book, didn't catch that before. And so you can go back and you can start to look at these things a little bit more differently. And so, as we go down this road, there are certain events which we don't and can't consciously take note of. They have remained, so to speak, below the threshold of consciousness. And so once again, you're only going to be able to become so conscious of this outside world. Your unconscious is always picking up a lot more than what you're picking up. But having that understanding is a very important thing. And so these things have happened, but they have been absorbed subliminally without our conscious knowledge. And So we can become aware of such happenings only in a moment of intuition or by a process of profound thought that leads to a later realization that they must have happened. And so the more that you get in touch with your higher self, you're basically the more that you dive into your unconscious, you'll get some more feelings of intuition, more urges to do certain things. And so you just have to be able to run with that and know that, okay, maybe I should take this action, or maybe I should do this because I feel I should do it. And that's a lot. It's pretty difficult for men to do just because we're very caught in thinking, being very mental, being very rational, very logical, rather than just moving with our urge to do things. And so it takes a man to get in touch with his feminine side to actually be able to interpret this intuition a little bit more. These feelings that rise up where it says, take action here, go do this. And so a lot of people just disregard their emotions as a whole and then don't even pay attention to their emotions.
Balance of masculine and feminine.
Exactly. And so most men are just, masculine, but they're like boy masculine.
Yeah.
They aren't even. So.
Not that. Feminine.
Yeah. So they're basically cut off from all their emotions. They don't even acknowledge their feminine side. And then along with that, they get caught in just thinking, and then they repress all of their emotions. And then eventually some crazy shit happens in their life, and then they have to feel everything. And it's like, well, shit, it's not just my relationship that I feel. Now I feel that the world's ending and all these other things, right? But it's things that they repress, and so then it comes out in some type of chaotic urge, and it's some shit.
I feel out of control. And when you're out of control, you act out of control. Not logically. To put this another simple way as well is the five senses. The brain takes in so much information at all times. You have a piece in your brain called the reticular activating system. It's a filter. It tells you what to focus on. So if there's a concert, loud music going on, but JK has an important message for me, he's like, T, boom, I zone in. The music almost disappears, and I'm focused in on listening what that is. That's the reticular activating system. Because the brain, your body, your nervous system will be so overloaded with all the information coming in, and people know this if you've been on extreme drugs type stuff, because you're like, whoa, this is big senses happening, like something's going weird. And but if you can understand, the brain takes it all in from when you're a baby, from cradle to grave. The brain has enough capacity to remember every single thing that's ever happened to it. So it does, but your conscious can't think of all that because it's so much memory. Like you couldn't even focus on what's going on around if you're thinking all the memory it's taken in. It takes it in and pulls out as it needs. And sometimes the conscious asks for something, and the unconscious knows what it needs, so it tries to shoot it through. And there's that feeling, hey, TK, you need to text that girl. TK, you need to walk in that door and see if there's somebody in there that you need to introduce yourself to. Well, nah, I'm going to my grandma's and I'm going to be a little late. But TK, go in. I might be nervous now. TK, go do it. Do it. And it's like, do it. And so now it's your decision. Are you going to listen to the gut and the logic and see what happens? Because the unconscious might know something you don't. Only because it's aware of everything. And you're only aware of what the reticular activating system, that filter, told you. So trust the gut. There's more talking to you than just the, hey, well, it would be a good idea to talk to this person and say sorry because you might have been mean to them. Yeah. It's like, no, maybe they needed something. They were going through an event. Their family, like they just need somebody to say, hey, I got your back. Like the weirdest stuff. So be aware. Awareness.
Yeah, so it's like your ego can only contain so much of this energy, right? So it's like your unconscious, once it takes point, so you can be at a concert, you're talking to somebody, and then it's like I'm fully focused on that conversation, and then it deletes every single thing outside of that. It's called deletion, so you literally can't even, you start to not even hear it, it's just being able to focus on him. But it's that same way with your goals, right? It's the same thing as if you're focused on your ideal self and creating the wave within that boat, that same idea that he's talking about. It's then every single thing is devoted to that idea, and then that's where all of your consciousness goes. And so you have all this great consciousness, all this power, but if it's unfocused, it's a lot more like a shotgun rather than being like a sniper. And so now you can actually be deliberate with what you're shooting towards. But to that point, it's like, so we can become aware of such happenings only in a moment of intuition. So it all goes back to being able to acknowledge these feelings that come up, to follow that urge and do the thing. But though we may have originally ignored their emotional and vital importance, it later wells up from the unconscious as a sort of afterthought. So we always have the review of the event that happened, and once again, it's never real. It's not actually what happened in the real scenario. But we do start to remember things that we weren't able to acknowledge in the moment. And so that afterthought also comes to us. And so you have to realize, like with what we're saying, it's like your consciousness, your ego, is like a battery, but your unconscious is like a nuclear power plant, and it has all this energy, but only so much of that energy can flow into the battery. But if your attention's very scattered, that battery's not, like the energy's not actually going into any output in the outside world or in the inside world. It's just a battery that has a little bit of charge. But if you can actually consciously choose where do I want that battery to flow from, right? Where do I want that energy to actually go into both my inside world as well as my outside world, then you can actually start to control your path a lot more. But the unconscious will start to charge that battery more, because you'll get to the point where you can have more batteries essentially. And so it's like rather than just being a small battery, you get to become more of a Tesla battery.
It's like as you go through a video game, like I'm thinking Legend of Zelda, like you start out with 3 hearts. As you start leveling up, boom, you earn another capacity for another heart. So now you have 4 capacity hearts, so you can go into bigger battles against bigger bosses.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so because that battery can only handle so much, you have to realize that. And so with that, it's like the more that you can become humble and start to actually acknowledge everything that's going on within that battery, you can actually allow more energy to flow from that nuclear power plant to get charged. But the thing is, too much charge can come through at once if you don't think about it and feel it in the right way, essentially. So that's where dreams come into play, because once again, our unconscious, it's flowing energy from the power plant, that nuclear supercharged, superpower area, and it's trying to get it to the battery. It has to do it in an intelligent way. It can't just tell you all this information and flood it up through. It doesn't want to kill you. So it may appear, for instance, in the form of dream, these symbols. And so as a general rule, the unconscious aspect of any event is revealed to us in dreams, where it appears not as a rational thought, but as a symbolic image. And so the right side of our brain is the rational side.
Left is logical, right's creative.
Yeah, so right is the very irrational side of the person, and so there's more of this artistic, it's more in terms of visualization. It's more about the movie side, the plays that go on in your head, essentially. And so that's where the unconscious really operates. And so you're trying to take things from that right side of the brain, the things that are a lot more abstract, and then trying to bring them into a logical form. But once again, it's like people get caught up in just the logical side of things, and they can't even pay attention to the images that go on within themselves.
So it's left logical.
Yeah.
And like he's saying, it has to interpret from the creative abstract, all that craziness, like art, interpreted into a single sentence or descriptive understanding. So that's why it's so hard with words. Like I could talk to Demby and I could say, I love you. Like, what does love mean? I had a visual and a feeling and a thought of all the things that love was and an image of how I wanted to send it to him. And then I said it. Now he gets to determine. There's a cutoff. He has to determine what that means now. So he might never experience what I really felt or what I was really sending him. You know what I'm saying? So it's the most interesting thing. It's like, hey, I could love you as a friend. I could love you as a brother, as a dog. You know, it's like that's 2 different loves. Like, hey, I have love for you. Or I love you. Like, I'll die for you. But I love you. It's the same sentence. So words, it's a filter, but it minimizes the whole information, the message I'm trying to send to him. So it also goes that way through the imagination, and you have to be able to get it simple and clear. But you have to understand so much depth of all the craziness to get it simple and clear, to be able to send the message as accurate as possible. But knowing it's never going to be 100%, and then they also have to interpret it. Interesting stuff.
Beautiful. Well said. So the more you can dive into this right-oriented side of the brain, the more you're actually going to be able to understand both the internal world as well as the external world. And to explain that you can simplify it, and your words become a lot more powerful because you're not just speaking, right? You're not just saying words. You're saying the words that are charged from that right side of the brain, essentially. And so they carry a lot more weight every single conversation that you have because everything you say has meaning. It's not just because you are meaning. Every single thing that comes out has a lot of meaning. It is charged in that sense. And so you can convey a lot more deep messages, and they can hit at an unconscious level because you yourself start speaking in terms of symbols.
Instead of shooting words as a shotgun, I might do this, I should do this, I'm going to work out, I'm going to start getting in this direction. Now it's like I'm shooting a sniper. It's like I'm working out every day. I got it planned out. I know my diet. I know this. I know how I'm going. So it's not scattered. It's the magnifying glass. Shooting that fire right with the sunlight, right?
You're going to talk about it, do about it.
Yes, sir. Be congruent with who you speak.
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate level of intelligence completely, even more than Socrates saying, I don't know what I don't know, is matching your words, being you living your words.
Yeah, it's like doing the things that are good for you without anybody like looking, you know.
Yes.
When nobody's looking is what you're really
Yeah.
doing for yourself.
I said
people will know too, because what do you call it? In J. Cole's off season, he has. I don't know what basketball player it is, but he's talking about. He's like, regardless of whether people know about the amount of work you put in the off season, they're going to see it.
Yep.
It always shows up. It always comes to light. But it's the same thing in life. Like people know whether or not the words you speak are actually congruent with who you are. And so somebody can talk a lot of things, but what they actually do matters. And so people can get caught up in this very left side of the brain where it's like they're following an influencer, they're following a hero, but they're being more like a sheep following that person. And so somebody can, watch Conor McGregor start having an accent, start acting like him.
Get a tattoo on the chest of the gorilla now.
Here's my fucking money.
Yeah.
But somebody can start to look at these influencers, and then they stay in the left side of the brain, and then they just speak like this person would speak. So they aren't actually getting the capacity to go into the right side of the brain. They're just staying on the left side, and they are simply just a mouthpiece. And so a lot of people think they're thinking, but they're just caught up in this left side, and then they're just speaking words that they think CNN would say, or these other ideas.
They were just that wood floating, and the wave took them, and they thought it was their wave. Like, hey, I'm riding the wave!
They'll even follow self-help stuff and be like, yeah, people don't think.
Yeah.
They'll say things like that, but it's just because they read it. They don't actually
They
feel
don't
it.
practice.
Yeah.
They don't feel the emotion.
wave.
Yeah, they ride away.
So once again, they're not charged. They don't actually have that energy. So they say things, but they aren't real things. And so
Echo of the wave.
Yeah. And so just this is kind of the entry into the next session that we'll do, but it was the study of dreams that first enabled psychologists to investigate the unconscious aspect of conscious psychic events. And so if people have a lot of childhood trauma, they'll continue to have dreams that pop up with the associations of that childhood trauma. And so if somebody had something very bad, like especially with children going through molestation, things like that, those type of things will still haunt them in their dreams. But the reason they come up and the reason they come into the dreams is because the unconscious still needs to be healed from that event.
They tried to block it to protect themselves.
And so they blocked all the feelings, and they didn't actually really get to feel that experience. And obviously nobody wants to feel an experience like that, but the person has to go through that dark side of the thing. It'd be the equivalent of Hercules, like we were showing earlier. It's like you're going to have to wrestle that beast. You're going to have to continue cutting off the head. And even though more heads continue to come up with it, you still have to keep slaying that beast. But you want to eventually get to the point where it's like you do kill the beast, but you integrate it within yourself. And so rather than trying to distance yourself from your past and these evil events that may have happened to you, making them part of who you are rather than trying to bury them.
And it goes back to the beautiful example of the weeds in the garden visual. It's like some people, especially young people that couldn't control all their circumstances right out of the gate, they might have got planted with more weeds right out of the gate. Whether that be physical, mental, emotional, you name it, abuse of any type growing up. Or let's say a kid goes to school or outside or away from his family, and then a bad experience happens. It's like you lock that in. It's like sometimes it's not your fault as a kid. You're not always in control of what happens to you. But once you get to the point where you realize that you have a garden and there's a lot of weeds in there, now you have the decision. I can either continue to let those weeds grow of my old childhood trauma, my old past that's hurting me, and I can block it and say there's no weeds, and then they all of a sudden take over the whole garden. You ever seen a lawn that's never been mowed? It's like it's just terrible. It turns into a forest or jungle. Or I can say, you know what? I'm not responsible for what weeds got put in my garden at the beginning. But I am responsible for getting them out so that I can plant a beautiful, luxurious, flourishing garden of beautiful fruits, vegetables, flowers, and now I can go show other people how to pull their weeds.
Well said. So we'll end it with this quote. But a person must pay dearly for the divine gift of creative fire. And so doing things like Teague's talking about with the garden, thinking of the brain in that way, or the psyche in that way, where it's like the more that you conquer these demons and the more you go down there and you deal through the pain and the hurt, the more you'll be able to get more energy from that power plant, right? You'll get more pure energy trapped into that battery. And so the more you can get original ideas, the more you can actually get things that aren't actually expressed in the world yet because they're coming from your unconscious. You're not getting them from the outside world. You're able to go more into that right side of the brain and actually take those things from there and put them out into the world. And that is a beautiful thing, but it takes time and effort to actually get tapped into that side. But that's what this whole book's going to be about. That's what everything's going to be about. And so symbols, to tie everything back to that, symbols are the key to understanding a lot of what happens in the world inside, in your internal world, as well as things that are happening in the outside world. And so the more we can discover symbols, and the more we can actually pay this price through putting in both the work, the time, the effort, every single thing into learning these types of ideas, the more you'll be able to progress as an individual and be you to the fullest. And that's really what we're talking about here, is how do you become more of who you are. So, bam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so